Welcome back to another journey through the stars. Tonight, we're venturing to the red sands of Mars, but not the Mars you might imagine from telescope observations or rover photographs. This is Mars as envisioned in The Expanse, a world transformed by human ambition into something unprecedented in science fiction. A civilization built entirely around a dream that spans generations, powered by the most advanced fleet humanity has ever constructed, and ultimately tested by the very success it sought to achieve. Before we begin this deep exploration of Martian culture, technology, and tragedy, if you enjoy these detailed examinations of science fiction worlds, hitting that like button and subscribing really helps the channel continue creating this content. Now, settle in as we explore the rise, glory, and crisis of the Martian Congressional Republic. Introduction: The Red Dream. In the universe of The Expanse, Mars represents humanity's first successful attempt at becoming a truly interplanetary species. But this isn't a story about planting flags or establishing research outposts. This is a story about millions of people dedicating their entire lives and the lives of their children and their children's children to a single audacious goal: transforming an airless, frozen desert into a living world. Mars in The Expanse occupies a unique position in science fiction. It's neither the mysterious frontier of early space opera, nor the already terraformed paradise of optimistic futurism. Instead, it exists in that grinding middle phase, where the dream is clear enough to inspire total dedication, but distant enough that no one alive will see its completion. This creates something fascinating: a society built not around immediate rewards, but around collective purpose that transcends individual lifetimes. The Martian Congressional Republic governs approximately 4 billion people in the book series, though the television adaptation increases this to around 9 billion. These aren't colonists in the traditional sense. By the time The Expanse begins, Mars has been independent from Earth for over a century. Multiple generations have lived and died under the red sky, never seeing Earth except as a blue dot in their telescopes. These are Martians, a distinct branch of humanity shaped by the harshest environment humans have ever attempted to call home. The planet itself remains fundamentally hostile to human life. The surface temperature averages -63 degrees Celsius, swinging between -143 at its coldest and 35 degrees at its warmest. The atmospheric pressure barely registers at 0.636 kilopascals, less than 1% of Earth's pressure. The thin atmosphere consists almost entirely of carbon dioxide, with traces of argon and nitrogen. No magnetosphere protects the surface from cosmic radiation. No liquid water flows across the regolith. This is a world that actively wants to kill anything living on it. Yet against this implacable reality, Mars has built something remarkable. The capital city of Londres Nova, New London, serves as home to approximately 40,000 people. Like most Martian settlements, it's a hybrid construction, part underground warren carved into the permafrost, and part surface installations pressing up through protective domes. The city consists of 10 agricultural domes visible from space and 7 neighborhoods radiating outward beneath the surface, connected by an extensive network of tube stations that determine the social geography of the city. The oldest sections of Londres Nova bear the scars of early automation, when construction robots carved the first habitations with no concern for aesthetics, only survival. Over the decades, successive generations have built upon this foundation, adding layers of complexity and, eventually, beauty to what began as purely functional spaces. The downtown district, Adderpole, houses the government buildings of the Martian Congressional Republic and serves as the only tube station connected to all other neighborhoods. Here, in chambers carved from Martian rock and lined with Earth-sourced materials, the leadership of an entire planet makes decisions that affect billions. But Adderpole isn't all gleaming government offices and upscale residences. Like any city, Londres Nova has its forgotten corners. The neighborhoods of Innis Deep and Innis Shallows, each served by only a single tube route, have become cul-de-sacs where society's margins gather. These areas house Martians who don't quite fit the military-industrial mold that dominates their civilization, including those with more Belter-like attitudes, antisocial, independent, resistant to conformity. Ironically, these neighborhoods often prove most welcoming to outsiders, if only because outsiders can't find housing anywhere else. Throughout the city and across the planet, the population engages in the great work, the Mars Terraforming Project. This endeavor, considered by many to be the greatest engineering project in human history, drives every aspect of Martian society. It employs millions directly and affects billions indirectly. Every policy decision, every resource allocation, every child's education leads back to this central question: how do we make Mars breathe? The founding and the dream. To understand Mars as it exists during the Expanse, we need to journey back to the 21st century, to those first tentative missions that established permanent human presence on the Red Planet. The initial colonization followed decades of robotic exploration. Rovers had mapped the surface, identified resources, and confirmed the presence of subsurface ice. When humans finally arrived, they came to stay. Those first generations faced challenges beyond imagining. Every breath of air had to be manufactured, every drop of water extracted from ice or recycled with obsessive efficiency. The thin atmosphere provided no protection from cosmic radiation, forcing settlers to live primarily underground or beneath heavy shielding. The reduced gravity, just 37.6% of Earth's, began immediately affecting human physiology in ways both beneficial and problematic. The early Martian settlements existed as outposts of Earth, governed by the United Nations and dependent on regular supply missions for survival. The colonists worked in mining operations, extracting resources that would be shipped back to Earth or used to construct the expanding settlements. They conducted scientific research, studying the Martian environment and developing the technologies that would eventually enable true terraforming. They lived in cramped quarters, worked long hours in hostile conditions, and raised children who would never see the world their parents left behind. About 3 generations into colonization, something fundamental shifted in the Martian psyche. The people who had been born on Mars, who had children of their own who were born on Mars, began to question their status as a colony. They looked at what they had built with their own hands, carved from Martian rock with their own labor, and asked themselves a question that would echo through history. Why does this belong to Earth? The independence movement didn't emerge overnight. It grew gradually, through countless small acts of assertion and self-determination. Martian engineers began designing their own spacecraft rather than using Earth specifications. Martian scientists pursued research agendas driven by local needs rather than Earth priorities. Martian families started thinking in terms of building something permanent, something that would last for their descendants, rather than merely maintaining an outpost. 2 major incidents nearly pushed Mars and Earth into open warfare before independence could be achieved peacefully. The first occurred when a group of Martian separatists published their manifesto, a document that compared their situation to the American colonies before their revolution. The United Nations responded by invoking what they called the breakaway province rule and launching 40 warships toward Mars. This massive show of force was intended to intimidate the independence movement into submission. Behind the scenes, however, cooler heads prevailed. Negotiations took place through back channels, with moderates on both sides working to de-escalate the crisis. Eventually, the UN fleet turned around and headed back to Earth. But the incident left deep scars in the Martian psyche. The message had been clear. Earth would use military force to maintain its control over Mars if necessary. This revelation accelerated the independence movement rather than suppressing it, convincing many Martians that true self-determination would require military strength, not just political will. The second major crisis came when the United Nations attempted to assert control over Martian shipbuilding. Earth issued a statement declaring that all future Martian vessels would be contracted through the Bush shipyards on Luna. This wasn't merely an economic decision. It was an attempt to prevent Mars from developing the industrial capacity to build its own military fleet. The Martian government's response was telling. They didn't even bother to reply. Work at their shipyards continued without interruption. The UN then escalated, ordering that all shipyards on Mars shut down immediately, pending inspection. There was just one problem with this ultimatum. It would take the UN 7 months to assemble an inspection team, and another 6 months for that team to travel to Mars. The UN had revealed its fundamental weakness in attempting to govern a colony 33 million miles away at closest approach and 249 million miles at maximum distance. By the time any Earth response could arrive, Martian facts on the ground would already be established. During this tense period of near conflict, a Martian engineer named Solomon Epstein changed everything. Working in his private time, Epstein had been developing modifications to standard fusion drive technology. Using magnetic coil exhaust acceleration, he believed he could dramatically increase drive efficiency, enabling spacecraft to maintain thrust throughout their entire voyage rather than just during initial acceleration and final deceleration. If it worked, ships could reach their destinations in a fraction of the time previously required, and with a fraction of the fuel. Epstein installed his prototype drive on his personal 3-person yacht and activated it for testing. The drive worked beyond his wildest projections. His small craft immediately began accelerating at rates that pinned him to his seat. The G-forces made it impossible for him to reach the controls to shut down the drive or adjust its settings. He couldn't even reach his communications equipment to call for help. For 37 hours, Epstein's yacht accelerated at over 7 Gs, a sustained force that crushed his chest, stopped his blood flow, and eventually caused a stroke that killed him. But by that point, his ship had achieved approximately 5% of light speed, and it just kept going, becoming the longest and most poignant funeral in human history. Before he died, however, Epstein had saved all his work on his wife Caitlin Escabel's computer. After his tragic death, she sold those plans to the Martian colonial government, securing her financial future and giving Mars the leverage it needed to finally achieve independence. The Epstein drive represented such a revolutionary leap in propulsion technology that it fundamentally reordered the power dynamics of the solar system. Mars approached the United Nations with a proposal: access to Epstein drive technology in exchange for independence. The UN had no real choice. Attempting to develop equivalent technology themselves would take years, possibly decades. In the meantime, Mars would have an insurmountable advantage in any military conflict. More importantly, the Epstein drive opened up the entire solar system for practical colonization and resource extraction. The asteroid belt, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, even the outer planets became accessible with this new technology. The economic opportunities were too vast to ignore in favor of maintaining control over a single colony planet. The United Nations granted Martian independence, and the Martian Congressional Republic was born. The newly sovereign nation immediately began organizing its government and, crucially, its military. The Martian Congressional Republic Navy and the Martian Marine Corps were established as the two most advanced military branches in the solar system. The dream that had driven the independence movement, the vision of Mars not as a colony, but as a full member of the interplanetary community, had been achieved. But the Martians didn't stop there. Having won their independence, they now turned their full attention to an even more ambitious goal: making Mars truly habitable. Not just for humans living in pressurized domes and underground tunnels, but for any form of life. They would give their planet an atmosphere thick enough to breathe, warm enough to support liquid water, stable enough to sustain ecosystems. They would make Mars green. The Terraforming Project, engineering on a planetary scale. The Mars Terraforming Project stands as the central organizing principle of Martian civilization. It's not merely a government program or a scientific endeavor. It's the reason Mars exists as an independent nation, the shared dream that unites billions of people in common purpose, and the measuring stick by which every Martian judges their worth and contribution to society. The scale of the undertaking defies easy comprehension. Terraforming Mars requires fundamentally altering every major system of the planet: its atmosphere, its temperature, its magnetic field, its surface chemistry, and ultimately, its biology. Each of these challenges presents problems that would occupy teams of scientists for lifetimes. Solving all of them in a coordinated fashion in the correct sequence with limited resources represents perhaps the most complex engineering project humanity has ever attempted. The atmosphere presents the first and most obvious challenge. Mars's thin atmosphere, with its pressure less than 1% of Earth's, cannot support liquid water on the surface. Any water exposed to the Martian atmosphere immediately either freezes or sublimates into vapor. For humans to walk on the surface without pressure suits, the atmospheric pressure needs to increase by more than 100-fold. But simply adding gas to the atmosphere isn't enough. The composition must change as well, from 96% carbon dioxide to something breathable, with sufficient oxygen to support human respiration and sufficient nitrogen to dilute that oxygen to safe levels. Creating this new atmosphere requires both adding new gases and removing or transforming existing ones. In the Expanse, Martian engineers pursue multiple strategies simultaneously. They mine subsurface ice deposits and vaporize them, releasing water vapor into the atmosphere. They use massive industrial facilities to break down carbon dioxide into oxygen and carbon, storing the carbon in solid form while releasing the oxygen. They import volatile compounds from asteroids and comets, crashing these icy bodies into the planet in carefully calculated impacts that add both mass to the atmosphere and heat to the surface. But even a thick, breathable atmosphere would quickly be stripped away by solar wind without protection. Earth's magnetic field, generated by its molten iron core, shields our atmosphere from the stream of charged particles constantly flowing from the sun. Mars lacks such a field. Its core long ago solidified, and without a molten, rotating core, no planetary magnetosphere can form naturally. This means that any atmosphere the Martians create will slowly bleed away into space unless they solve the magnetosphere problem. In the television adaptation of The Expanse, we see glimpses of the Martian solution. By the time of the show's events, Mars has successfully created an artificial magnetosphere, strong enough to produce Aurora borealis, those shimmering curtains of light that form when charged solar particles interact with a planet's magnetic field. The specifics of how they achieve this remain somewhat mysterious in the show, but real-world scientists have proposed several possibilities that might work. One approach involves placing giant superconducting rings at Mars's poles. These massive structures, potentially hundreds or thousands of kilometers in diameter, would carry enormous electrical currents through superconducting materials that offer zero resistance. The flowing current would generate a magnetic field that, while artificial, could provide the same protective function as Earth's natural field. The energy requirements for such a system would be enormous, requiring fusion reactors or other advanced power sources. But for a civilization capable of building the Epstein drive, such technology seems within reach. Another possibility involves positioning powerful electromagnets at the L1 Lagrange point between Mars and the Sun. This location, where Mars's gravity and the Sun's gravity balance, would allow a magnetic field generator to create a protective bubble that deflects solar wind before it reaches Mars. The advantage of this approach is that one strategically placed installation could protect the entire planet. The disadvantage is that such an installation would need to be incredibly powerful and would represent a single point of failure for the entire terraforming project. Whichever method the Martians use, the achievement of a stable magnetosphere represents a major milestone in the terraforming timeline. With the atmosphere protected from solar wind erosion, the other aspects of the project can proceed with confidence that the work won't simply be undone by cosmic forces. Temperature regulation presents another enormous challenge. Mars orbits farther from the Sun than Earth, receiving only about 43% as much solar energy per square meter. Even with a thick atmosphere to trap heat, Mars would remain dangerously cold without additional warming. The Martians pursue multiple strategies to address this. Releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere helps trap what solar heat does reach the surface. Large orbital mirrors could be positioned to reflect additional sunlight onto the planet. Industrial processes might release waste heat deliberately rather than trying to contain it. The timeline for achieving a breathable atmosphere stretches beyond the lifespan of anyone working on it. The project will take well over a century, possibly several centuries, before completion. The original colonists who began the work understood they would never see the green Mars they dreamed of creating. Their children wouldn't see it either, nor would their grandchildren. The best-case scenario meant that perhaps great-grandchildren might experience the first days when a human could stand on the Martian surface and breathe unaided. For many, that timeline extended even further into an uncertain future. This temporal reality creates something unique in Martian culture, a society organized around delayed gratification on a multi-generational scale. Every Martian grows up understanding that their personal contribution to the terraforming project represents merely one small part of a vast, ongoing effort that began before they were born and will continue long after they die. The measure of a life isn't what you achieve for yourself, but what you contribute to the great work. The terraforming project employs millions of Martians directly. Engineers design and build the massive atmospheric processors that work continuously to transform carbon dioxide into breathable air. Scientists monitor the planetary climate systems, tracking minute changes in temperature, pressure, and composition. Construction workers build and maintain the infrastructure that supports the terraforming operations. Miners extract the raw materials needed for all of this industry. Transport specialists move resources between sites spread across an entire planet. Indirectly, the project affects billions more. The Martian education system trains every child with the knowledge and skills that might contribute to terraforming. Whether a student shows aptitude for physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, or mathematics, their education emphasizes applications relevant to the planetary transformation. Even those who pursue careers in government, law, arts, or other fields understand that ultimately their work serves the broader goal of making Mars livable. The Martian Congressional Republic directs enormous resources to the project. Significant portions of the planet's gross domestic product, measured in the trillions of Martian dollars, flow into terraforming research and implementation. Government priorities consistently favor terraforming needs over other concerns. When choices must be made between competing resource allocations, the question always comes back to, which option better serves the great work? This singular focus creates a society characterized by extreme efficiency and discipline. Martians cannot afford waste. Every kilogram of material, every kilowatt of power, every worker hour represents potential progress toward the goal or potential loss of momentum. The culture rewards those who accomplish more with less, who find elegant solutions to complex problems, who push themselves beyond comfortable limits in service of the greater good. This efficiency extends to the Martian government itself, where Earth's United Nations often bogs down in bureaucratic complexity and the competing interests of 30 billion people spread across a planet with severe overpopulation problems. The Martian Congressional Republic operates with streamlined effectiveness. The government serves a clear mandate: facilitate the terraforming of Mars while defending the planet from external threats. Every other consideration remains secondary to these twin imperatives. By the time the main events of the Expanse begin, the Mars Terraforming Project has achieved remarkable progress despite the enormous challenges involved. The planet boasts a nascent magnetosphere capable of producing Aurora. The atmospheric pressure has increased measurably, though still far below breathable levels. Temperature variations have moderated slightly. Underground aquifers have been tapped and their water utilized. Vast areas of previously sterile regolith have been seeded with engineered bacteria designed to begin the slow process of creating actual soil. Yet, for all this progress, Mars remains fundamentally uninhabitable without technological support. Not a single blade of grass grows on Mars outside a protective dome. The soil remains sterile in most places. The air stays unbreathable. The temperature still drops to lethal levels during the night. The surface radiation still requires shielding. Martians still live in pressurized tunnels and domed cities, still depend on life support systems for their every breath, still exist as guests on a world that tolerates rather than welcomes human presence. This gap between the dream and the reality creates both motivation and frustration. Every Martian child grows up being shown images of what Mars will become. Blue skies, flowing rivers, forests and grasslands spreading across the planet. These images hang in schools, government buildings, even family homes. They represent the promise that justifies all the sacrifice, all the hardship, all the discipline demanded of Martian society. But those same children also grow up confronting the harsh truth visible through every window and dome. Mars remains a cold, dead world, and it will likely remain so for their entire lives. The younger generations of Martians, those who never knew Earth and have spent their entire lives in the cramped underground cities, begin to show cracks in the collective faith. Some question whether the terraforming project makes sense, whether living under domes forever might be more practical than pursuing an impossible dream. This generational divide becomes a source of tension in Martian society, with older Martians who immigrated from Earth remembering what was lost and feeling driven to recreate it, while younger native-born Martians increasingly accept tunnel and dome life as normal. The terraforming project also affects Mars's relationship with Earth and the Belt. The enormous resource requirements drive Martian interest in asteroid mining, bringing them into competition with Belters for access to valuable ore bodies and ice deposits. The need to maintain a powerful military to protect these resource chains and defend against Earth aggression diverts resources that might otherwise accelerate the terraforming work. The UN views the terraforming project with a mixture of envy, as Earth's environment continues to degrade, and suspicion, as Mars grows more powerful and self-sufficient. But despite all these challenges and complications, the Mars terraforming project continues. It continues because millions of Martians wake up each day and go to work on it. It continues because the Martian government commits resources to it year after year. It continues because parents teach their children that contributing to the great work represents the highest calling a human can answer. Most of all, it continues because Mars has built its entire identity around this dream. And to abandon it would mean confronting fundamental questions about why Mars exists as an independent nation at all. A society forged in pressure. The harsh realities of Martian existence create a population unlike any other in human history. Every person living on Mars understands viscerally that their survival depends on technology, cooperation, and constant vigilance. A critical system failure could kill thousands. A supply chain disruption could cause widespread suffering. A moment's carelessness in a pressure suit could mean death. These realities shape Martian character from childhood. Martians develop a reputation throughout the solar system for competence, efficiency, and toughness. They have to be. Their environment tolerates no slack, no waste, no half measures. A bridge engineer on Earth might design with generous safety margins, knowing that slightly overbuilt infrastructure causes no harm. A Martian engineer designs with minimal margins, because every extra kilogram of structural material represents resources not available for something else. The difference isn't laziness versus diligence. It's the difference between abundant resources and desperate scarcity. This efficiency manifests in how Martians approach problems. They favor elegant solutions over complicated ones, robust systems over fragile specialization, proven methods over untested innovations. While this might seem conservative, it actually reflects hard-won wisdom. On Mars, getting clever with an unproven technology might save resources in the short term but create catastrophic vulnerabilities in the long term. The Martian approach values reliability above novelty, function above form, and results above intentions. The social structure of Mars reflects these values. Martian society operates as something between a democracy and a meritocracy, with the Martian Congress serving as the legislative branch, the Prime Minister as head of government, and the Martian courts handling judicial matters. But unlike Earth's UN, where political influence often depends on wealth, connections, or manipulation of public opinion, Mars rewards demonstrated competence. Those who contribute meaningfully to the terraforming project or to Mars's defense gain respect and advancement. Those who waste resources or shirk their responsibilities find themselves marginalized. Military service holds particular esteem in Martian culture. The Martian Marine Corps represents the elite of Martian society, rigorously trained and equipped with the most advanced technology the Republic can provide. Joining the MMC means accepting incredible hardship in exchange for the honor of defending Mars. Marines train constantly, pushing their bodies to the limits of human endurance in Mars's reduced gravity, so they can operate effectively under higher gravity environments like Earth. The MMC utilizes Goliath-powered armor, sophisticated exoskeletons that enhance human strength and provide life support in hostile environments. A Marine in Goliath armor can operate in vacuum, lift hundreds of kilograms, and survive impacts that would kill an unarmored human. This technology gives Martian Marines the ability to compete with numerically superior Earth forces, compensating for Mars's smaller population with superior equipment and training. Beyond the military, most aspects of Martian life involve some form of contribution to the collective good. The education system prepares young Martians for roles in the terraforming project, the military, or support industries. Students don't merely learn academic subjects. They learn how those subjects apply to making Mars livable. A chemistry student doesn't just memorize reactions. They study the atmospheric chemistry of terraforming. A biology student doesn't merely dissect specimens. They consider how life might be engineered to survive in Martian conditions. This educational focus creates a population with remarkable technical competence. The average Martian possesses knowledge of physics, chemistry, and engineering that would impress educated people on Earth. They need this knowledge just to understand their own environment and contribute meaningfully to their society. A Martian child growing up learns not just that air is necessary for breathing, but precisely how that air is manufactured, what could go wrong with the systems producing it, and what they might do to help maintain those critical systems. The physical environment shapes Martian psychology in profound ways. Living in tunnels and under domes creates a form of mild claustrophobia that Martians learn to manage, but never entirely escape. When Martian Marine Bobby Draper visits Earth in the show, Other people can immediately identify her as Martian by her body language. Martians unconsciously hunch their shoulders when under an open sky, as though expecting it to fall on them. They struggle to look at horizons correctly. They move with the distinctive gait of people adapted to lower gravity, trying to navigate Earth's stronger pull. This physiological adaptation to Mars's 0.376 g gravity creates both advantages and limitations. Martians develop denser bones and stronger muscles than Belters, who grow up in even lower gravity environments. But compared to Earthers, Martians are weaker and must work harder to move around under Earth's full 1G. This physical difference reinforces the psychological distance between Mars and Earth. A Martian visiting Earth feels literally weighed down by the planet, burdened by gravity, in a way that serves as constant reminder of their alien status. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, Martians develop fierce pride in their identity and accomplishments. They see themselves as humanity's future, as the first humans adapting to life on a world other than Earth. Where Earthers take their planet's hospitality for granted, living on a world that evolved to support them, Martians understand that they exist only through constant effort and technological sophistication. This creates a sense of superiority, a belief that Martians are stronger, smarter, more disciplined, and more forward-thinking than soft Earthers, who inherited a paradise they're now destroying through overpopulation and environmental degradation. This pride extends to disdain for Belters, whom Martians view as lacking the discipline and long-term vision that defines Martian culture. Belters work in mining and resource extraction, living in ships and stations, never settling anywhere permanently. They focus on immediate survival and personal freedom, rather than contributing to any grand civilizational project. To Martians, Belters represent wasted human potential, people who could contribute to making Mars livable, but instead choose to drift through the solar system, taking from asteroids without building anything lasting. The Martian attitude toward Belters reveals an uncomfortable truth. For all their claims of creating a better civilization than Earth's, Mars still participates in the exploitation of the Belt's resources and labor. Martian ships patrol the Belt, enforcing Martian economic interests. Martian corporations negotiate extraction rights from OPA factions. The materials flowing from the Belt to Mars fuel the Terraforming Project. Martians justify this by arguing that they're using those resources for something greater than profit, that they're building a new world rather than merely consuming. But from a Belter's perspective, exploitation remains exploitation, regardless of the exploiter's justifications. Food on Mars comes primarily from the agricultural domes, supplemented by vat-grown protein and synthetic nutrients. Real meat remains a luxury. Most Martian beef or chicken is actually cultured in industrial bioreactors, grown from cell cultures without ever being part of a living animal. Fruits and vegetables grow in hydroponic systems under carefully controlled conditions. The diet is nutritionally complete but monotonous compared to Earth's variety. Yet Martians adapt, just as they adapt to every other aspect of their environment, accepting limitations as the price of pursuing the dream. Social life on Mars centers around work and collective purpose, rather than entertainment or personal indulgence. Martians socialize in small groups, often with people they work alongside. They drink in modest bars, exercise in training facilities, and spend time with family in cramped quarters. The culture doesn't encourage individualistic expression or personal ambition disconnected from the collective good. A Martian who wants to become rich or famous for its own sake is viewed with suspicion. But a Martian who wants to become an accomplished engineer or decorated Marine or successful project manager earns respect, because those ambitions serve Mars. This creates a society that Earth finds somewhat alien, and that Belters view as oppressively conformist. Martians live regimented lives in service of distant goals. They sacrifice personal comfort for collective benefit. They subordinate individual desires to societal needs. The government directs resources with firm authority. Dissent exists, but remains muted. Alternative lifestyles struggle to find acceptance. Mars isn't quite authoritarian, as citizens retain meaningful political rights and the ability to influence government policy through the Martian Congress. But it's certainly not a liberal democracy in the Earth mold, with all the messiness and inefficiency that implies. Yet within this structured society, Martians find meaning and purpose that many Earthers and Belters lack. Every Martian knows their work matters, that their contribution serves something larger than themselves. They're part of an audacious project to transform an entire world, to make humanity truly multiplanetary, to prove that human ingenuity and determination can overcome any obstacle. This sense of purpose, of being part of something historic and important, compensates for the hardships and limitations of Martian life. The streets and tunnels of Londres Nova and other Martian cities buzz with activity, but it's purposeful activity rather than the chaotic energy of Earth's overcrowded metropolises. People move with direction, heading to work sites or training facilities or government offices. The tube stations operate with precision, trains arriving and departing on exact schedules. The markets sell practical goods efficiently rather than catering to endless consumer desires. Everything about Martian life emphasizes function, efficiency, and contribution to the collective mission. This culture creates humans who are simultaneously more disciplined and more brittle than their Earth or Belt counterparts. Martians excel when operating within clear hierarchies toward defined goals. They struggle when faced with ambiguity, moral complexity, or situations where the right answer isn't obvious. The clarity of the terraforming project, the unambiguous goal of making Mars livable, serves as moral North Star for Martian society. Without that clarity, some Martians find themselves adrift, uncertain how to operate in a more ambiguous world. The Martian Congressional Republic Navy, pride of Mars. If the terraforming project represents the dream of Mars, the Martian Congressional Republic Navy represents its teeth. The MCRN is not merely a military force. It's the physical embodiment of Martian values, technological prowess, and national pride. In a solar system where Earth commands numerical superiority, Mars compensates with qualitative advantage, building ships that represent the pinnacle of human naval engineering. The MCRN operates under a straightforward doctrine: be so advanced, so well-trained, and so deadly that potential enemies think twice before challenging Mars. The Navy doesn't need to match Earth's fleet ship for ship. It needs to make every potential conflict so costly that Earth decides diplomacy and trade offer better paths to their goals. This strategy of deterrence through technical superiority shapes every aspect of MCRN design and operations. Martian warships share several common characteristics that distinguish them from their UN Navy counterparts. First, they're built with efficiency in mind. Every cubic meter of interior space serves a purpose. Every system is designed for reliability and maintainability. Martian ships use modular construction techniques, allowing damaged components to be quickly replaced rather than requiring exceeding repairs. This reflects both Martian engineering philosophy and the practical reality that Mars cannot afford to maintain as many ships in reserve as Earth can. Second, MCRN ships prioritize quality of systems over quantity of systems. A Martian destroyer might mount fewer weapons than a comparable UN vessel, but each weapon system will be more advanced, more accurate, and more deadly. Martian point defense cannons track targets with greater precision. Martian railguns fire with higher muzzle velocity. Martian missiles carry more sophisticated guidance systems. Result is that ton for ton, Martian ships outperform UN vessels in virtually every tactical metric. Third, Martian ships are built for sustained high-G acceleration. The Epstein drive gives all human spacecraft incredible performance by pre-Expanse standards. But Martian ships extract maximum efficiency from the technology. Their crews train constantly to operate under high-G conditions that would incapacitate UN sailors. This gives MCRN ships superior maneuverability and the ability to dictate engagement parameters. A Martian ship that wants to fight can close to combat range quickly. A Martian ship that wants to avoid battle can accelerate away from pursuit. The pride of the MCRN fleet is the Donnager-class battleship. 8 vessels that represent the pinnacle of Martian military engineering. These massive warships measure nearly 500 meters long, roughly the length of a 130-story office building laid horizontally. They're shaped like elongated arrowheads, with 4 engine nacelles fanning out at the rear like arrow fletching. Each nacelle houses an RT-10 Cominari Epstein drive, capable of sustained high-thrust operations. The most visually striking features of a Donnager-class ship are its 2 enormous VX-12 faux-hammer-turreted ultra-heavy railguns. Each railgun measures approximately 80 to 90 meters long, twice the length of a Corvette-class frigate. These weapons represent the largest shipborne railguns ever constructed by humanity. Unlike missiles, which can be intercepted by point defense systems, railgun projectiles traveled too fast for interception once fired. A faux hammer projectile, accelerated through electromagnetic forces to tremendous velocity, will penetrate virtually any armor it hits. The railguns do have limitations. They're most effective at relatively close ranges by space combat standards. At extreme distances, the target has time to see the railgun fire and maneuver before the projectile arrives. Additionally, the tremendous recoil from firing such massive weapons affects the ship's vector, requiring course corrections. But within their optimal engagement envelope, the foe hammers can cripple or destroy any ship in the solar system with a single well-placed shot. Beyond the railguns, Doniger-class battleships bristle with weapons systems. They carry dozens of torpedo tubes capable of launching various missile types, from conventional explosive warheads to nuclear-tipped penetrators to electronic warfare packages. The ships mount extensive point defense cannon arrays, automated weapons that track and destroy incoming missiles and torpedoes. These PDCs fire streams of depleted uranium projectiles at cyclic rates measured in thousands of rounds per minute, creating kill zones around the ship that hostile ordnance struggles to penetrate. The sensor suites on a Doniger represent another area of Martian superiority. Arrays of radar, LiDAR, thermal imaging, and optical tracking systems give these ships awareness of everything happening within millions of kilometers. The ship's Combat Information Center processes this data through sophisticated computer systems, providing the command crew with real-time tactical pictures of the battle space. Martian sensor operators train constantly to interpret this information, identifying threats and opportunities in the chaos of space combat. But perhaps the most revolutionary feature of MCRN warships isn't visible at all. The Martian fleet pioneered stealth technology in space, developing coating materials and heat management systems that dramatically reduce a ship's detectability. This seems contradictory at first. Space is often described as the worst possible environment for stealth, since a ship's heat signature radiates in all directions and can be detected at vast distances. Everything about operating a spacecraft generates heat. The drives, the life support systems, the computer systems, even the crew's bodies. This heat must be radiated away, or the ship will cook its own crew. Martian engineers solved this problem through a combination of sophisticated thermal management and specialized hull coatings. The stealth coating absorbs and diffuses radar waves rather than reflecting them back to the source. It also manages thermal emissions in ways that make the ship appear much cooler and smaller than it actually is. Active cooling systems capture heat internally and store it temporarily rather than radiating it continuously. When the stealth system engages, the ship essentially runs cold, minimizing all detectable emissions. This technology has severe limitations. A ship running in full stealth mode cannot fire its engines without giving away its position. The act of maneuvering produces heat and thrust signatures that sensors can detect. Weapons fire is even more obvious. Opening missile bay doors creates radar reflections. Launching torpedoes produces thermal signatures. firing railguns generates electromagnetic emissions, and once combat begins, maintaining stealth becomes impossible. The ship must radiate away all the stored heat from its systems, and battle damage often compromises the stealth coating itself. Still, stealth technology provides enormous tactical advantages. A ship operating in stealth can approach undetected, position itself optimally, and strike first. In naval combat, where engagement ranges often exceed hundreds of thousands of kilometers, the ability to close unseen can be decisive. The victim has no time to prepare defenses or maneuver away. By the time they detect the attack, missiles are already incoming, or railgun projectiles are seconds from impact. The MCRN built an entire class of vessels around this technology. The Corvette-class light frigate sacrifices armor and firepower for maximum stealth capability and high acceleration. These ships, measuring approximately 150 meters long, operate as scouts, raiders, and fast attack craft. A corvette running dark can penetrate deep into enemy-controlled space, gather intelligence, and escape before anyone knows it was there. In combat, corvettes work in wolf packs, emerging from stealth simultaneously to overwhelm larger vessels with coordinated attacks. The television adaptation features several memorable Corvette-class ships, most notably the Tachi, later renamed the Rocinante. This ship, originally part of the Doniger's small craft complement, becomes home to the show's main characters and demonstrates the capabilities of Martian naval engineering throughout the series. The Rocinante carries 4 torpedo tubes, a keel-mounted railgun, and extensive point defense coverage. Its Epstein drive enables sustained high-G burns that would kill most UN crews. Its stealth coating, though often damaged by combat and improvised repairs, still provides occasional tactical advantages. Between the Corvette class and the Doniger class, the MCRN operates several intermediate ship types. Destroyer-class vessels serve as the workhorses of the fleet, balancing firepower, protection, and cost-effectiveness. These ships typically operate in small squadrons, providing patrol coverage across Martian-controlled space and escorting high-value assets. Cruiser-class vessels serve as squadron flagships, coordinating destroyer operations and providing additional combat power when needed. The MCRN also maintains a substantial fleet of support vessels. Freighters transport supplies and equipment. Fleet auxiliaries provide underway replenishment, allowing combat ships to remain on station longer. Repair ships offer mobile maintenance and damage control capabilities. Troop transports carry Martian Marines to wherever they're needed. The unglamorous logistics tale enables the tip of the spear to strike effectively. Manning these ships requires highly trained personnel, and the MCRN invests enormous resources in naval education and training. The Martian Naval Academy produces officers who understand not just ship operations, but the broader strategic picture of solar system politics and military theory. Enlisted personnel attend technical schools that provide education comparable to university engineering programs on Earth. Every member of an MCRN crew, from the captain to the lowest-ranking enlisted sailor, knows their ship's systems intimately. This training emphasis creates crews who can adapt to unexpected situations and perform damage control under combat conditions. When battle damage disables primary systems, MCRN sailors know how to route around failures and keep their ships fighting. When unusual tactical situations arise, MCRN officers can improvise solutions rather than rigidly following doctrine. This flexibility, combined with superior equipment, makes the MCRN pound for pound the most effective military force in the solar system. The Navy culture reflects broader Martian values, while adding its own unique elements. MCRN sailors develop intense loyalty to their ships and shipmates. They take pride in their vessel's capabilities and maintain them meticulously. A dirty ship or poorly maintained system reflects badly on the entire crew. The naval tradition of ship shape takes on additional meaning when operating in an environment where equipment failure means death. Discipline in the MCRN is strict but fair. Officers treat enlisted personnel with respect, acknowledging their technical competence and crucial contributions. The hierarchy exists not for its own sake, but to ensure clear chains of command during the chaos of combat. This creates a professional atmosphere rather than the rigid, sometimes oppressive discipline that characterized wet navies of earlier eras. An enlisted sensor operator who notices something unusual can bring it to the captain's attention without fear of punishment for speaking out of turn. The relationship between the MCRN and the Martian Marine Corps deserves special attention. While organizationally separate, the two services work closely together and share common cultural touchstones. Marines depend on the Navy to transport them to operational areas and provide fire support during ground operations. The Navy depends on Marines to secure shipboarding actions and provide small unit security. Ships of the Donnager class carry a full contingent of Marines who serve as the ship's ground combat force and boarding party. Marines assigned to ships occupy a somewhat unusual position. They're not ship's crew in the traditional sense. They don't stand watches or operate ship systems, but they train constantly in the ship's gym and simulators, maintaining combat readiness for whenever they're needed. They also serve as the ship's last line of defense if enemies board or attempt to seize the vessel. This creates mutual respect between sailors and Marines. The sailors acknowledge that Marines are the real warriors, while Marines respect that sailors possess technical skills they lack. The MCRN's strategic doctrine emphasizes deterrence and power projection. Mars cannot afford to fight a prolonged war of attrition with Earth. The UN's population advantage means they can ultimately build more ships and train more crews. Mars's strategy therefore focuses on maintaining such a significant qualitative advantage that Earth never feels confident enough to risk open warfare. Every Martian ship must be good enough to take on multiple UN vessels. Every Martian crew must be skilled enough to outfight numerically superior opponents. This doctrine shapes procurement decisions and operational deployments. The MCRN prioritizes cutting-edge technology, even when it's expensive and difficult to produce. They maintain aggressive patrol schedules to demonstrate presence and capability. They conduct regular exercises showcasing their ship's performance. They cultivate a reputation for ruthless efficiency in combat. All of this serves to convince Earth that the cost of war with Mars exceeds any conceivable benefit. The strategic situation becomes more complex when considering the belt. Both Mars and Earth depend on resources extracted from asteroids and outer system moons. Protecting the ships and stations involved in this resource extraction requires naval presence throughout the belt. This creates friction with the Outer Planets Alliance, the loosely organized political movement representing belt interests. Belters view Martian warships as oppressors, enforcing an exploitative economic system. Martians view belt stations as potential threats requiring monitoring. The MCRN walks a careful line in the belt. They need to protect Martian commercial interests and project power to deter Earth aggression. But heavy-handed tactics risk pushing belters into Earth's orbit or sparking a resistance that could disrupt the resource flows Mars depends on. The Navy therefore attempts to maintain presence without overwhelming occupation, to respond to actual threats without creating new ones through overreaction. It's a delicate balancing act that doesn't always succeed. Naval officers also grapple with the moral implications of their role. They signed up to defend Mars, to protect the Terraforming Project and Martian citizens from Earth aggression. But they find themselves enforcing economic arrangements that benefit Mars at the belt's expense. They participate in actions against belter ships and stations, people who arguably have legitimate grievances. Some officers rationalize this as necessary for Mars's survival. Others struggle with cognitive dissonance between their ideals and their orders. The technological edge that defines the MCRN requires constant maintenance and improvement. Martian naval research divisions work continuously on next-generation systems. They study captured or purchased Earth and belt technology, looking for ideas to incorporate or vulnerabilities to exploit. They run simulations and conduct experiments. They push the boundaries of what's possible with existing physics and engineering. This research culture keeps Mars ahead of the curve, but also consumes resources that might otherwise accelerate the terraforming project. Ship design in the MCRN reflects a philosophy of integrated systems and redundancy. Every critical system has backups. Power can be rerouted through multiple pathways. Life support includes emergency reserves and independent zones that can be sealed off. This redundancy sometimes frustrates Earth observers who see it as over-engineering, but it reflects hard lessons learned from operating in an environment that provides no second chances. When a ship's reactor fails in deep space, backup systems aren't luxuries, but survival necessities. The visual design of MCRN ships projects an aesthetic of aggressive functionality. These aren't beautiful ships in a traditional sense. They're angular, industrial, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. The color scheme favors dark grays and blacks that enhance stealth characteristics. Markings are minimal, often limited to whole numbers and the Martian Congressional Republic flag. The message is clear. These are tools of war, built to kill and survive, with no consideration wasted on appearance. Inside, Martian warships maintain a similar aesthetic. Corridors are narrow and utilitarian. Living quarters are cramped. The focus is on operational spaces, the command deck, engineering, weapons control, sensor stations. Even the crew mess halls prioritize function over comfort, serving nutritious but uninspired food efficiently. This Spartan environment reflects Martian values and keeps crews focused on their mission rather than distracted by comfort. The relationship between the MCRN and the civilian government remains generally healthy throughout most of the timeline. The Navy understands it serves the Republic and the Terraforming Project, not the other way around. Senior naval officers advise the civilian leadership on military matters, but accept civilian authority over strategic decisions. This healthy civil-military relationship helps Mars avoid the coup risks that plague some militarized societies. The Navy's purpose is clear: protect Mars so the great work can continue. However, tensions sometimes emerge when naval needs compete with terraforming priorities for resources. Building a new battleship diverts materials and labor that might otherwise expand atmospheric processors. Training naval personnel requires educational resources that might produce more engineers. The most advanced technology goes to weapons systems rather than terraforming equipment. The government must constantly balance defense requirements against progress toward the green Mars of their dreams. These tensions increase as the timeline progresses toward the discovery of the protomolecule and the opening of the ring gates. The Navy argues for expanding the fleet to match new threats and opportunities. The civilian leadership worries about the cost and the message such expansion sends to Earth and the Belt. Different factions within the Martian Congress take different positions, creating political complexity that the military must navigate carefully. The personal stories of MCRN sailors and officers illuminate the culture from the inside. These are people who believe deeply in Mars and the Terraforming Project. They volunteered for military service knowing it would be demanding and potentially deadly. They train constantly, maintaining skills that might never be used but must be perfect if ever needed. They spend months away from families, living in cramped quarters, operating in an environment that kills mistakes instantly. They do all this willingly because they believe their service protects something worth protecting. When Martian Marine Gunnery Sergeant Bobby Draper describes the MCRN to others, her pride is palpable, despite her growing disillusionment with Martian leadership. She talks about ships that are works of art in their efficiency. She describes crews that function like precision machines. She explains the honor of serving in a military force dedicated to something greater than conquest or profit. Even when she questions specific orders or leaders, she never questions the fundamental worthiness of the MCRN's mission. This pride extends throughout Martian society. Civilians follow naval news closely, celebrating victories and mourning losses. Children play at being MCRN officers or Marines, the most prestigious career aspiration in Martian culture. Families with members serving in the Navy display that service prominently. The MCRN represents Mars at its best: disciplined, competent, advanced, and dedicated to protecting the dream that defines their civilization. The fleet also serves symbolic functions beyond its military role. MCRN ships visiting Earth or Belt stations demonstrate Martian capability and confidence. they serve as mobile embassies, showing the solar system that Mars is not merely Earth's former colony, but a fully independent power. The sight of a Donnager-class battleship in orbit around Ceres or Ganymede reminds everyone that Mars can project power throughout the solar system, that Martian interests must be considered in any calculation. Mars and Earth, the Cold War in space. The relationship between the Martian Congressional Republic and the United Nations of Earth defines much of the political landscape in the Expanse. This isn't a simple story of oppressor and colony, though it began that way. By the time the main narrative starts, it's evolved into something more complex, a Cold War between two human powers with fundamentally different visions for humanity's future, competing for resources and influence across the solar system. Earth remains the center of human civilization by population and raw economic output. 30 billion people live on humanity's cradle world, packed into sprawling megacities and struggling with environmental degradation that centuries of industrialization have caused. The oceans have risen, drowning coastlines. The climate has changed, making some areas barely habitable. Food production depends on advanced agriculture and synthetic nutrients. Despite these problems, Earth retains enormous advantages: a breathable atmosphere, abundant water, gravity compatible with human evolution, and magnetic field protection from cosmic radiation. The United Nations governs Earth through a complex bureaucratic structure that attempts to balance the interests of billions of people with diverse needs and perspectives. This creates a government that's often slow to act, prone to compromise, and vulnerable to influence by various factions and interest groups. Where Mars can make decisions quickly and implement them efficiently, Earth's government bogs down in process and politics. This frustrates Martian leaders, who see Earth wasting its advantages through indecision and internal conflict. From Earth's perspective, Mars represents an ungrateful child that abandoned its parent. Earth provided the initial resources, technology, and people that made Martian colonization possible. Earth developed the Epstein drive that Solomon Epstein modified. Earth's scientists and engineers trained the people who built Mars's infrastructure. The UN views Martian independence as a betrayal of this investment and a loss of valuable resources that Earth desperately needs for its own environmental restoration efforts. This fundamental disagreement about Mars's independence creates tension that never fully resolves. Earth officially recognizes Martian sovereignty and maintains diplomatic relations with the MCR. But UN leaders consistently look for ways to reassert influence over Mars, or at least prevent Mars from becoming strong enough to challenge Earth militarily. This manifests in various ways: economic pressure, diplomatic maneuvering, intelligence operations, and quiet support for factions within Mars that favor closer ties to Earth. Mars, meanwhile, remains perpetually suspicious of Earth's intentions. The memories of the near-war incidents during the independence struggle remain fresh in Martian political consciousness. Every UN action that affects Mars gets analyzed for hidden motives. When Earth builds new warships, Martian planners assume they're intended for use against Mars. When Earth negotiates resource extraction rights in the belt, Martians worry about economic encirclement. This suspicion sometimes borders on paranoia, but it's grounded in historical reality. Earth did try to suppress Martian independence. Earth would prefer a compliant Mars to an independent rival. The Cold War manifests most obviously in the naval arms race. Both powers continuously build new ships, develop new weapons systems, and improve existing capabilities. Neither side wants war, but both prepare for it constantly. The logic of deterrence requires each side to maintain sufficient strength that the other calculates war as too costly to risk. This creates a cycle where each side's defensive preparations appear to the other as offensive threats, prompting responses that further escalate tensions. Intelligence operations form another front in the Cold War. Both Earth and Mars run extensive spy networks trying to steal each other's technology, assess each other's capabilities, and identify vulnerabilities. These operations sometimes turn violent when agents are caught or when operations go wrong. The Martian Congressional Republic Security Directorate and Earth's UN Intelligence Directorate wage shadow warfare across the solar system, recruiting informants, planting surveillance equipment, and occasionally engaging in sabotage. The belt becomes the primary arena for Earth-Mars proxy conflicts. Both powers need belt resources: water ice, metals, organic compounds, rare elements. They compete for favorable trade agreements with belt stations and mining operations. They support different factions within the OPA, trying to influence belt politics in their favor. When conflicts erupt in the belt, Earth and Mars often find themselves on opposite sides, though usually acting through proxies rather than committing their own forces directly. This proxy warfare has real costs for belters who find themselves caught between two powers using their homes as chess pieces. A belt station that makes a trade deal favorable to Mars might find Earth suddenly less interested in buying their products or more aggressive in enforcing regulations. A mining operation that accepts Earth investment might face harassment from Mars-supported OPA factions. Belters increasingly resent both inner planets for treating the belt as a resource to be exploited and a battleground for their conflicts. Economic competition adds another dimension to Earth-Mars tensions. Mars's advantages in advanced manufacturing and ship construction threaten Earth industries. Earth's larger economy and population give it advantages in sectors requiring mass production or extensive service networks. Both powers attempt to use trade policy as a weapon, granting access to their markets as a reward for cooperation, and threatening tariffs or embargoes as punishment for resistance. The Martian economy focuses heavily on high-tech manufacturing, military production, and terraforming-related industries. Mars exports advanced spacecraft components, weapons systems, environmental technology, and engineering expertise. They import basic resources from the belt, some luxury goods from Earth, and organic compounds that Mars's limited agriculture can't produce in sufficient quantity. This economic structure makes Mars vulnerable to disruptions in belt resource flows, but less dependent on Earth than Earth would prefer. Earth's economy remains more diverse, but less advanced in cutting-edge technology. Earth produces enormous quantities of consumer goods, agricultural products, and basic industrial materials. Earth's universities and research institutions still generate important innovations, though Mars increasingly competes in this arena. Earth's service economy, particularly in entertainment, arts, and education, dwarfs anything Mars can offer. But Earth struggles to maintain its technological edge as Martian innovation accelerates. Cultural differences compound the political and economic tensions. Martians view Earthers as soft, lazy, and wasteful, living on a planet that provides everything they need while squandering their advantages. Earthers view Martians as rigid, militaristic, and arrogant, obsessed with their terraforming project while looking down on the civilization that made their existence possible. Both stereotypes contain elements of truth and miss important nuances, but they shape how the two populations perceive each other. These stereotypes influence personal interactions. When Earthers and Martians meet, they often approach each other with preconceptions that color their interpretations. A Martian's efficiency might be seen as coldness. An Earther's friendliness might be interpreted as lack of seriousness. Miscommunication and misunderstanding occur frequently, sometimes with diplomatic consequences when they involve people in positions of authority. The media on both planets reinforces these divisions. Martian news broadcasts emphasize stories that portray Earth negatively: environmental disasters, crime, government corruption, social decay. Earth's media highlights Martian militarism, social rigidity, and what they portray as the foolishness of the terraforming project. Both sides engage in propaganda that demonizes the other while glossing over their own problems. This creates populations that see each other as adversaries rather than fellow humans with legitimate differences. Despite all these tensions, open warfare between Earth and Mars never quite erupts during most of the Expanse timeline. Both sides understand that such a conflict would be catastrophically destructive. Earth's numerical advantages would eventually overwhelm Mars, but Martian technological superiority would extract terrible costs. The likely result would be Pyrrhic victory for Earth, leaving both powers severely weakened and vulnerable to belt uprisings or other threats. This mutual understanding creates a stable, if tense, balance of power. The balance gets tested repeatedly by various incidents and crises. The destruction of the ice hauler Canterbury and the subsequent events around Eros Station push Earth and Mars to the brink of war. Both sides suspect the other of being behind the attacks and prepare for military action. Only the revelation that a third party, Protogen Corporation and its proto-molecule research, is actually responsible prevents the outbreak of hostilities. But the crisis demonstrates how fragile the peace truly is, and how quickly accidents or miscalculations could trigger catastrophe. The incident at Ganymede becomes another flashpoint. A battle between Earth and Martian forces in orbit around Jupiter's largest moon kills Marines from both sides and destroys a significant agricultural facility that the belt depends on. The fighting erupts because of proto-molecule-based creatures attacking both forces, but neither side initially understands this. Each assumes the other initiated hostilities. The situation escalates rapidly, with both powers committing more forces to the Jupiter system and preparing for a wider conflict. Through all these crises, cooler heads on both sides work to prevent total war. Moderate politicians on Earth and Mars recognize that their real interests align more than hardliners want to admit. Both need a stable solar system where resources flow freely and human civilization can continue developing. Both face potential threats from the proto-molecule and whatever created it. Both would benefit from cooperation rather than conflict. These moderates engage in back-channel diplomacy, trying to build understanding and trust despite the public antagonism. Relationship between Earth and Mars also contains elements of competition that drive progress. The race to develop better technology, build more capable ships, and achieve impressive accomplishments pushes both sides to excel in ways that benefit humanity as a whole. Martian innovations in stealth technology eventually spread throughout the solar system. Earth's developments in agricultural efficiency help feed growing populations. The competition, while dangerous, also provides motivation for excellence that might not exist in a more peaceful environment. Some individuals work to bridge the Earth-Mars divide. Scientists from both planets collaborate on research projects. Business people establish trade relationships. Ordinary citizens who meet each other discover that the stereotypes don't match reality. These personal connections, while unable to resolve the fundamental political tensions, create networks of understanding that might become crucial when crises demand cooperation rather than conflict. The role of the Belt as a third power adds complexity to the Earth-Mars dynamic. Sometimes Earth and Mars find themselves in implicit alliance against Belt demands for independence or better treatment. Other times, one inner planet will support Belt factions against the other in their proxy conflicts. The Belt's growing strength and organization under the OPA creates a situation where neither Earth nor Mars can afford to ignore Belt concerns entirely. This triangular power structure sometimes stabilizes the system by preventing any two-power block from dominating, but it also creates additional opportunities for miscalculation and conflict. The ring gates and the crisis of purpose. Everything changes when the proto-molecule opens the rings. The discovery of this ancient alien technology, its appropriation by various human factions, and its ultimate use to open gateways to 1,300 habitable solar systems fundamentally reshapes the political and social landscape of human civilization. For Mars specifically, the ring gates represent an existential crisis that strikes at the very heart of what it means to be Martian. The proto-molecule first appears as a mystery surrounding the destruction of various ships and the strange events on Eros Station. As humans begin understanding what they're dealing with, various factions attempt to control or weaponize the technology. Protogen Corporation's experiments aim to harness the proto-molecule for corporate advantage. Earth and Mars both try to secure samples and data. The Belt, through figures like Fred Johnson, seeks to prevent either inner planet from monopolizing this new power. The proto-molecule ultimately proves impossible to control in traditional ways. It operates according to programming billions of years old, designed by creators humans can't comprehend. When it hijacks Eros Station and launches it toward Venus, humanity can only watch in horror. The subsequent ring construction near Uranus demonstrates capabilities so far beyond human technology that they border on incomprehensible. The proto-molecule builds a massive structure using Venus's mass, creating a gate to a hub connecting to 1,300 other systems. Each of those systems contains at least one potentially habitable world. Many contain multiple habitable planets or moons. These aren't marginal environments requiring extensive terraforming like Mars. These are worlds with breathable atmospheres, liquid water, Earth-like temperatures, and ecosystems that might support human life with minimal intervention. Some are literally paradise worlds, more pleasant than Earth itself, with none of the environmental damage or overpopulation problems that plague humanity's birthplace. For Mars, the opening of the rings represents a disaster disguised as an opportunity. The entire Martian civilization has organized itself around the goal of terraforming Mars into a livable world. Generations of Martians have dedicated their lives to this project, accepting hardship and sacrifice because they believed they were building something unique and precious. The ring gates suddenly make that sacrifice unnecessary. Why spend centuries transforming Mars when you can simply walk through a gate to a world that's already Earth-like? The question spreads through Martian society like a virus, infecting every level from ordinary citizens to the highest government officials. In the show, we see the impact through characters like Bobby Draper, who visits Earth and sees recruiting advertisements playing everywhere, offering free land on new worlds to anyone willing to colonize them. The ads show beautiful landscapes, open skies, and opportunities that Mars can never provide. They promise everything that the terraforming project promised, but immediately rather than generations in the future. Young Martians, especially those who've grown up in tunnels and under domes, prove particularly susceptible to the lure of the new worlds. They've heard all their lives about the green Mars that will someday exist, seen the images and videos of what their planet will become, but they've never experienced what those images promise. The new worlds offer actual experience rather than deferred hope. Why wait for Mars when you can have paradise today? The brain drain begins slowly at first, then accelerates dramatically. Skilled workers who've spent years contributing to the terraforming project hand in their resignations and book passage through the rings. Engineers, scientists, technicians, the very people Mars depends on for the great work, abandon their posts for opportunities elsewhere. Some feel guilty about leaving, but conclude that their children deserve better than life in tunnels. Others feel the Martian dream died when the rings opened and see no reason to continue chasing an obsolete goal. The Martian government tries various strategies to stem the exodus. They increase wages and benefits for critical workers. They restrict emigration, requiring approval that often gets denied. They launch propaganda campaigns emphasizing the nobility of completing what Mars started. They appeal to patriotism, asking people to stay for the sake of their planet and their culture. Nothing works. The lure of ready-made worlds proves too strong. The Martian population begins declining for the first time in the Republic's history. Economic impacts follow swiftly. Labor shortages slow the terraforming project, falling behind schedules that were already measured in generations. Infrastructure maintenance suffers as trained personnel leave and can't be replaced quickly enough. Industrial production drops. The Martian economy, so carefully balanced to support the great work, begins contracting. Tax revenues fall, forcing the government to make difficult budget choices. The entire system that made Mars work starts breaking down. The MCRN faces its own crisis as personnel leave for civilian opportunities on the new worlds. A military career, once the most prestigious path a Martian could follow, loses appeal when it means staying in the solar system while friends and family emigrate to paradise. Retention rates drop. Recruiting becomes difficult. The Navy that once stood as the pride of Mars starts showing signs of the strain, with ships undermanned and positions unfilled. More troubling, elements within the Martian government and military begin seeing opportunities in the chaos. If Mars can't terraform their own world, perhaps they can secure one of the new worlds through the rings. The military power that Mars built to defend itself and deter Earth aggression might be repurposed for conquest. Why struggle with Mars when Martian military strength could seize a ready-made world and establish a new Martian civilization there? This thinking leads to one of the darkest chapters in Martian history. A faction within the Martian government and military, led by figures like Admiral Winston Duarte, begins secretly diverting resources and advanced technology to a breakaway fleet. They steal ships, weapons, and, most critically, proto-molecule samples and research. Their plan is ambitious and treasonous. Pass through the rings, find a suitable world, establish a new power base using the most advanced technology humanity possesses, and build a civilization that doesn't answer to Earth, Mars, or anyone else. The conspiracy reaches high into the Martian government and military command structure. These aren't rogue elements or isolated extremists. They're respected officers and officials who've concluded that Mars, as currently constituted, has no future. The terraforming project will never be completed. The Republic will slowly decline as its population drains away. The only option they see is radical action. Abandon Mars itself and use Martian military strength to build something new somewhere else. When the conspiracy is discovered and the breakaway fleet disappears through the rings, it delivers another blow to Martian confidence and identity. The military that represented everything Mars believed about itself, discipline, loyalty, and dedication to collective purpose, has fractured. Senior officers betrayed their oaths and stole some of the most powerful warships in the solar system. The institution that Martians trusted to protect them has produced traitors who might return one day as enemies. The crisis forces painful self-examination throughout Martian society. Every assumption about Mars's place in human civilization requires reevaluation. The Terraforming Project, which gave meaning to Martian existence, might be a waste of resources that could be better spent elsewhere. The independence from Earth, which Martians fought for and took such pride in, might have been won just in time to become irrelevant as humanity spreads across 1,300 worlds. The military strength that was supposed to protect Mars might prove insufficient against threats emerging from the vastness beyond the rings. different Martians respond to the crisis in different ways. Some double down on the terraforming project, arguing that completion becomes even more important now as a matter of principle and pride. Mars started this work. Mars should finish it regardless of what opportunities exist elsewhere. These hardliners view emigration through the rings as cowardice or betrayal, abandoning Mars in its time of need. They call for stricter controls on emigration and stronger government intervention to keep the great work moving forward. Others take a more pragmatic view. They acknowledge that the rings change everything, and that clinging to the old dream in the face of new realities is foolish. Mars should pivot, they argue, using its technological advantages and remaining population to secure colonies on the new worlds. The Martian Congressional Republic could become a multi-world power, with Mars itself as the cultural and governmental center, but with populations on multiple planets through the rings. This would require abandoning or drastically scaling back the terraforming project, but it might ensure Martian civilization's survival. A third faction emerges advocating for something more radical: dissolution of the Martian Congressional Republic itself. They argue that Martian identity was always provisional, tied to the specific circumstances of living on a hostile world and working toward a transformative goal. With those circumstances changed and that goal rendered obsolete, there's no reason for Mars to continue existing as a separate political entity. Mars should negotiate terms to rejoin Earth's government, or perhaps help form a new solar system-wide government that includes Earth, Mars, and Belt representatives equally. These debates tear at the fabric of Martian society, creating divisions that make the already difficult situation worse. The government struggles to maintain authority as its legitimacy comes into question. If Mars exists to terraform Mars, and terraforming Mars no longer makes sense, then what justifies the MCR's existence? The civilian leadership finds itself unable to answer this question satisfactorily, leading to political instability and frequent changes in government as different factions gain and lose influence. The economic situation deteriorates further as these political struggles distract from practical governance. Infrastructure continues degrading. Supply chains break down. The carefully maintained efficiency that made Mars work despite its harsh environment begins failing. Power outages become more common. Life support systems require more emergency repairs. Food production drops as agricultural domes suffer maintenance failures. The standard of living for ordinary Martians, never luxurious but generally reliable, starts declining noticeably. Some Martian communities, particularly in the more remote settlements far from Landris Nova and the other major cities, begin experiencing serious problems. These settlements, always dependent on regular supply runs and technical support from the central government, find themselves increasingly isolated as the government's capacity to support them diminishes. A few settlements are evacuated entirely, their populations relocated to larger cities or emigrating through the rings. This contraction of human presence on Mars, reversing centuries of expansion, symbolizes the crisis's depth. The social impact proves equally devastating. Martian culture had been built around shared purpose and collective sacrifice for a distant goal. When that goal becomes questionable, the social bonds that held the society together begin fraying. Crime rates increase. Mental health problems become more common. Suicide rates rise as people who dedicated their lives to the terraforming project struggle with the sense that their sacrifices were meaningless. The strong community bonds that characterized Martian life weaken as people start looking out for themselves rather than the collective. Through all of this turmoil, some Martians cling to their identity and their dreams. They continue working on the terraforming project, despite the falling completion estimates and shrinking budgets. They maintain their ships and stations with the same meticulous care they always have. They raise their children with the same values that previous generations passed down. These holdouts represent Martian culture at its most stubborn and admirable, refusing to abandon their purpose even when the universe seems to have rendered that purpose obsolete. Bobby Draper becomes one of the most visible faces of this Martian resilience. After leaving the MMC in disillusionment over the government's corruption and the conspiracy that stole fleet resources, she eventually returns to Mars and works to expose the rot that had infected her beloved Republic. Her journey from loyal Marine to disillusioned veteran to determined reformer mirrors Mars's own crisis and potential rebirth. She represents Martians who refuse to give up on their world, even when giving up would be easier. The character of Esai Martin in the television adaptation provides another perspective on the crisis. As Bobby's nephew, he represents the younger generation of Martians who never knew Earth and have grown up entirely on Mars. When he decides to emigrate through the rings to one of the new worlds, it breaks Bobby's heart, but she understands his reasoning. He wants to see a sky without a dome, feel rain on his face, walk through forests, and swim in oceans. These experiences that humans evolved to enjoy are denied to Martians, and now they're available just a gate transit away. His decision, multiplied by millions of others like him, represents the demographic hemorrhaging that threatens Mars's future. The irony doesn't escape the more thoughtful Martians. They spent generations building a civilization around making Mars livable, developing technologies and techniques that could transform a dead world. Now that expertise becomes valuable in a completely different context. The new worlds aren't all paradise. Some have environmental challenges, slightly too much gravity, atmospheres with suboptimal oxygen levels, aggressive native microorganisms, unstable weather patterns. Martian expertise in environmental engineering, in building sealed habitats, in managing life support systems, all proves crucial for colonizing these new worlds. Mars becomes the solar system's premier source of colonial equipment and engineering consulting, even as this trade accelerates the departure of the very experts providing it. The economic model shifts. Mars can't rely on the closed loop that sustained the terraforming economy. Instead, it begins orienting toward export markets, manufacturing colonial equipment, building ships optimized for gate transit and colonial support, training engineers and technicians for work on the new worlds. This transition proves painful and inefficient, with many false starts and failed businesses. But gradually, a new economic structure emerges, one where Mars's value comes not from what it will become, but from what it can do for colonies elsewhere. This shift requires accepting a fundamental redefinition of what Mars is. No longer the future of humanity, Mars becomes the place that enables humanity's future elsewhere. No longer the goal, Mars becomes a tool. This represents a massive psychological adjustment for a population raised to believe they were building something unique and precious. Coming to terms with being useful rather than special, with being a means rather than an end, challenges every aspect of Martian identity. The political situation eventually stabilizes, though not in the way the old guard hoped. A new generation of leadership emerges, people who never expected to walk on green Mars, who grew up knowing the terraforming project would likely outlive them, and who can therefore approach the crisis without the emotional baggage of shattered dreams. These pragmatists focus on what Mars can realistically achieve and how the Martian people can thrive in the new environment created by the rings. Some terraforming work continues, but at a dramatically reduced scale and with different justifications. Completing the project becomes a matter of Martian pride and historical continuity rather than practical necessity. Future generations of Martians might see a green Mars not because they need it, but because their ancestors started the work, and Mars finishes what it starts. The timeline stretches from already long to essentially indefinite, with atmospheric targets revised downward and expectations managed more realistically. The MCRN also adapts to new realities. With fewer personnel and reduced budgets, the Navy can't maintain the massive fleet it once operated. Ships get mothballed. Some get sold to colonies beyond the rings who need patrol vessels and system defense boats. The Navy focuses on maintaining a core of truly advanced vessels rather than trying to match the UN ship for ship. This actually returns to the original Martian naval doctrine: quality over quantity, technological superiority compensating for numerical inferiority. Interestingly, the crisis eventually improves Mars's relationship with Earth. Both inner planets face similar challenges from the rings. Both see their populations declining as people emigrate to new worlds. Both struggle with the question of what their identity means when humanity can access 1,300 solar systems. This shared challenge creates opportunities for cooperation that didn't exist during the Cold War period. Earth and Mars begin working together on colonial support, on security arrangements for the ring space, on scientific research into the proto-molecule and its builders. The belt experiences its own transformation. The OPA achieves the independence it long sought, with belter colonies established on multiple worlds beyond the rings. But the belt also faces questions about its identity and purpose. If belters can have worlds with gravity and breathable atmospheres, are they still belters? The culture that developed around living in microgravity and depending on recycled air might not survive when its environmental determinants no longer exist. Belt, Earth, and Mars all discover that the rings challenge not just their politics and economics, but their fundamental sense of who they are. Legacy and lessons. What Mars teaches us. As our journey through Martian history and culture draws toward its conclusion, it's worth stepping back to consider what the Expanse's portrayal of Mars tells us about human nature, civilization, and the challenges of becoming a truly spacefaring species. Mars in the Expanse isn't just a setting or a faction. It's a thought experiment about what happens when humans attempt something genuinely unprecedented and how that attempt shapes them in return. The first lesson Mars teaches is about the power and danger of collective purpose. Martian society achieved remarkable things because it organized around a clear, compelling goal. The Terraforming Project gave every Martian a reason to get up each day, a framework for understanding their place in history, a legacy to leave their children. This shared purpose created social cohesion, motivated excellence, and enabled sacrifices that would be unthinkable in societies lacking such clarity. But that same clarity became brittleness when circumstances changed. A society built around one purpose struggles when that purpose becomes questionable. The Martians who dedicated their lives to terraforming didn't have alternate frameworks for finding meaning when the rings rendered their life's work potentially obsolete. The collapse wasn't just economic or political, but existential. This suggests that resilient civilizations need multiple sources of meaning, diverse goals and values that can sustain people when any single purpose fails. The second lesson involves the relationship between environment and culture. Mars's harsh conditions created Martians who were tough, efficient, and disciplined. But these traits, while adaptive for survival on Mars, sometimes became maladaptive in other contexts. Martian efficiency could shade into inflexibility. Martian discipline could become rigidity. Martian pride could turn into arrogance. The show explores this through characters like Bobby Draper, who excels in Martian military culture but struggles when operating in the morally ambiguous situations she encounters working with James Holden's crew. This raises questions about how human nature might change as we spread to different environments. Will people raised on low-gravity worlds think differently than those raised under Earth gravity? Will living under domes and in tunnels create psychological differences from living under open skies? The Expanse suggests yes, and that these differences might be profound enough to create distinct human cultures or even subspecies over time. Mars represents just the first step in this divergence. The third lesson concerns the nature of progress and the assumptions we make about it. The Martian Terraforming Project assumed that making Mars Earth-like was inherently good and worth any sacrifice, but the discovery of 1,300 worlds that were already Earth-like calls this assumption into question. Was transforming Mars ever the right goal? Or was it just what Martians could conceive of doing with the technology available? The rings reveal that sometimes apparent progress toward a difficult goal is just wasted effort compared to finding an easier path to the same end. This has implications for how we think about humanity's real future in space. We often assume we'll terraform Mars because we can imagine doing it with extensions of current technology. But what if that's not the optimal path? What if suspended animation for interstellar travel becomes practical? What if we develop technologies for living comfortably in space without needing planets? The Expanse reminds us that our current vision of space colonization might be as limited as the Martian vision was before the rings opened. The fourth lesson involves military power and its relationship to civilization. Mars built the most advanced military in the solar system to protect itself and deter Earth aggression. That military embodied Martian values and served legitimate defensive purposes, but military power proved destabilizing in multiple ways. The arms race with Earth consumed resources that might have accelerated terraforming. The conspiracy within the military that stole fleet assets demonstrated that powerful institutions can threaten the very societies they're meant to protect. And Martian military superiority enabled oppressive policies toward Belters that contradicted the ideals Mars claimed to represent. This resonates with real-world concerns about militarization and the military-industrial complex. The Expanse doesn't offer simple answers about how much military power is too much, or how to prevent military institutions from becoming threats themselves, but it shows clearly that you can't build a perfect military without that military affecting and potentially corrupting your society. The MCRN was exactly what Mars needed for defense, and also part of what went wrong with Mars. The fifth lesson concerns identity and its relationship to material circumstances. Martian identity was deeply tied to specific material realities: living on Mars, working on terraforming, serving in the military or support industries. When those material circumstances changed with the opening of the rings, Martian identity became unstable. This suggests that identities based primarily on external circumstances may be fragile compared to identities rooted in values, relationships, or other more portable foundations. Yet the Martians who maintained their identity despite the crisis were often those most tied to material Mars itself, who loved the planet not for what it would become, but for what it was and what they'd built there. This complicates the lesson. Perhaps the most resilient identities combine material groundedness with transcendent values, loving specific places, while also committing to principles that could survive relocation if necessary. The sixth lesson involves the relationship between democracy and efficiency. Mars wasn't exactly authoritarian, but it wasn't a liberal democracy either. The government exercised significant control over people's lives, directing resources and labor toward collective goals. This created efficiency that Earth's more democratic and messy system couldn't match. Martians got things done, while Earth debated endlessly. But when Mars needed to adapt to the crisis caused by the rings, that efficiency became a handicap. The rigid system couldn't easily pivot to new goals because it was optimized for the old ones. Earth's apparent inefficiency contained hidden flexibility. Its messy political process actually represented many different groups pursuing different agendas, creating diversity of approach that became valuable when circumstances changed. Some Earth factions adapted quickly to the rings, while others resisted. And this diversity ensured that humanity tried multiple strategies simultaneously. Mars's unity of purpose became strategic vulnerability when that unified purpose no longer made sense. The seventh lesson concerns the limits of human foresight and planning. The Martian Terraforming Project represented planning on a multi-generational timescale, thinking centuries ahead about what Mars might become. This was admirable and necessary for such an ambitious undertaking. But it also meant that when unexpected developments occurred, like the discovery of the rings, enormous investments of time and resources suddenly pointed in potentially wrong directions. The project that seemed visionary became, at least partially, a colossal waste. This doesn't mean long-term planning is foolish, but it suggests the need for humility about our ability to predict the future. Plans should be robust enough to deliver value even if circumstances change dramatically. Investments should provide intermediate returns rather than only paying off decades in the future. The all-or-nothing quality of Mars's bet on terraforming made the society vulnerable to the unexpected, which should have been expected, because the unexpected always happens eventually. The portrayal of Mars in the Expanse also serves literary and thematic functions in the larger story. Mars represents human ambition and capability, showing what our species can achieve when it commits fully to a grand project. The Martian Congressional Republic demonstrates that humans can build functional societies on hostile worlds, can develop technologies that border on miraculous, can organize billions of people toward common goals. This optimism about human potential balances the show's often darker themes about human corruption, violence, and short-sightedness. But Mars also represents the tragedy of unintended consequences and the limits of human control. The same ambition that built Martian civilization created the circumstances for its crisis. The military power developed for defense spawned conspiracies and breakaway factions. The discipline and efficiency that made Mars strong also made it brittle. The dream that motivated generations became a burden for those who watched it crumble. Mars's story is simultaneously inspiring and cautionary, showing both what we can achieve and how success contains the seeds of its own problems. The visual representation of Mars in the television adaptation deserves mention as well. The show portrays Mars as both beautiful and harsh, with stunning vistas of red deserts under pink skies, combined with the industrial grimness of underground tunnels and pressurized domes. Martian cities feel real, lived in, with the accumulated modifications and adaptations that would naturally develop over generations. The ships of the MCRN look like warships, functional and deadly, rather than sleek and romantic. This aesthetic grounds the Martian story in plausible reality. Mars doesn't look like a science fiction fantasy, but like an actual human civilization that grew organically from specific circumstances. The attention to detail, from the Martian accents to the way characters move in lower gravity, to the design of equipment and architecture, creates immersion that makes the dramatic and thematic elements more impactful. We believe in Mars because we can see and feel how it works. The relationship between the television show and the novel series adds another layer. While the show necessarily condenses and modifies elements of the books, it largely remains faithful to the portrayal of Mars and Martian culture. The books provide additional depth and detail, particularly regarding the political machinations within the Martian government and the experience of ordinary Martians dealing with the crisis. The show makes Mars visually real in ways books can't, while the books explore Martian interiority more thoroughly. Together, they create a comprehensive portrayal of this fictional civilization. Mars in The Expanse also invites comparison to other fictional versions of Mars in science fiction. Unlike the ancient dying Mars of Edgar Rice Burroughs, or the pristine wilderness Mars of early pulp stories, The Expanse's Mars is thoroughly human, shaped by technology and industry. Unlike the already terraformed Mars of some optimistic stories, it remains a work in progress with uncertain outcome. Unlike the Mars colonized by corporations or by dystopian governments in some tales, it's a functional democracy, pursuing goals its citizens genuinely believe in. This Mars feels more plausible than many alternatives, while remaining dramatically interesting. The scientific plausibility of the Martian Terraforming Project deserves some attention. While The Expanse takes liberties with physics in some areas, particularly with the Epstein drive's performance, the portrayal of terraforming challenges is broadly accurate to current scientific understanding. Mars really does need a thicker atmosphere, warmer temperatures, and some kind of magnetic field protection. The methods shown, atmospheric processing, ice mining, and artificial magnetosphere generation, represent real proposals scientists have made. The timeline of centuries is realistic, perhaps even optimistic. The show respects the genuine difficulty of what Martians attempt. This scientific grounding makes the story's themes more resonant. The Martian dream isn't fantasy, but a reasonable extrapolation of real technology and real human capabilities. This means the lessons drawn from Mars's story might actually apply to humanity's real future in space. When we eventually attempt to colonize Mars or other worlds, we'll face similar challenges, building societies in hostile environments, maintaining motivation for multi-generational projects, dealing with unexpected developments that make our plans obsolete. The Expanse gives us a chance to think through these challenges in advance through fiction. Conclusion: the dream that never dies. As we reach the end of our exploration of Mars in the Expanse, we return to where we began, a civilization built around a dream. That dream of transforming a cold, dead world into a living paradise motivated millions of people across multiple generations. It created a distinct human culture with its own values, aesthetics, and way of life. It drove technological development that benefited all of humanity. It gave people purpose and meaning that transcended their individual lives. The opening of the ring gates challenged that dream profoundly, revealing it as potentially unnecessary and certainly not unique. New worlds that were already habitable made the century-long project of transforming Mars seem less essential. The crisis this created tested Martian civilization to its foundations, exposing weaknesses that had always existed but hadn't mattered when everyone shared the same goal. Yet even in crisis, even when the dream seemed to crumble, something of Mars persisted. The skills and knowledge developed for terraforming found new applications in colonial engineering. The discipline and efficiency that characterized Martian culture remained valuable traits. The ships of the MCRN, while reduced in number, still represented the pinnacle of human naval technology. Mars adapted because Martians, for all their rigidity in some areas, were ultimately pragmatic about survival. The story of Mars in the Expanse remains incomplete. The books and show continue beyond the events we've discussed, exploring how Martian society continues evolving as humanity spreads through the Gate network and encounters new challenges. Without spoiling those later developments, we can say that Mars finds new purposes, new reasons to exist, new ways to matter in a transformed solar system. The dream of green Mars may fade, but the Martian people endure and adapt, proving that they're more than just their original purpose. For viewers and readers, Mars serves as a mirror for humanity's own ambitions and limitations. We see in Martian successes what we might achieve with dedication and discipline. We see in Martian failures how even our most noble projects can go wrong or become obsolete. We see in Martian adaptation how humans might navigate a future that refuses to conform to our plans. Mars teaches us about ourselves, about our capacity for both greatness and folly, both vision and blindness. The technical achievement of the Expanse's portrayal of Mars shouldn't be underestimated. Creating a believable human civilization on another world with its own politics, culture, military, economy, and social dynamics represents a remarkable feat of world-building. That James S. A. Corey, the pen name for collaborators Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, accomplished this while also telling engaging character-driven stories and exploring complex themes speaks to their skill as storytellers. The show's production team, led by showrunners Naren Shankar, Mark Fergus, and Hawk Ostby, successfully translated this written world into visual reality. Mars in the Expanse reminds us that science fiction at its best doesn't just entertain, but illuminates. It takes current trends and extrapolates them thoughtfully. It asks, what happens when humans encounter new circumstances and challenges? It explores how technology changes society, and how society shapes technology in return. Mars provides a laboratory for examining human nature under conditions that don't yet exist, but might someday. The lessons learned from Martian triumphs and tragedies might help guide humanity's real expansion into space when that expansion begins in earnest. The dream of terraforming Mars persists in our real world as well. Scientists continue studying how it might be accomplished. Engineers design technologies that could begin the process. Visionaries like Elon Musk speak seriously about making humanity a multi-planetary species with Mars as the second home. Whether this dream will follow the path shown in the Expanse, whether it will be superseded by other approaches, or whether it will remain forever just a dream, we cannot yet know. But the Expanse gives us a framework for thinking about the challenges and implications of such an undertaking. As we close our journey through the red sands and pressurized tunnels of fictional Mars, we can appreciate what this portrayal adds to the science fiction genre and to our cultural conversation about humanity's future. Mars in the Expanse is neither utopia nor dystopia, but something more interesting. A genuinely different human society, shaped by unique circumstances, facing problems both familiar and unprecedented, achieving remarkable things, while also making terrible mistakes. The Martian Congressional Republic, with its rigid efficiency and grand ambitions, with its powerful navy and uncertain future, with its dream of green Mars that may never fully come to pass, represents one possibility among many for how humans might spread beyond Earth. It's a possibility that rings true in its complexities, that respects both human capability and human limitations. that shows us as we might be when challenged by the ultimate hostile environment. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into the world of the Expanse and the story of Martian civilization, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us create more content like this, examining the rich worlds of science fiction with the depth and detail they deserve. We have many more journeys planned through the universe of science fiction, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. The dream of Mars, whether in fiction or reality, represents something fundamental about human nature. We look at hostile environments and imagine transforming them. We face impossible challenges and attempt them anyway. We build societies around purposes larger than individual lives. We reach for stars and planets beyond our current grasp. Sometimes we succeed gloriously. Sometimes we fail catastrophically. Often we achieve something in between, muddling through with partial victories and hard lessons learned. Mars in the Expanse embodies all of this: the ambition, the struggle, the achievement, the crisis, the adaptation, and the continuation. It shows us humans at their best and worst, building something remarkable while also creating problems they couldn't foresee. It demonstrates that even the most carefully planned projects encounter the unexpected, and that success often contains the seeds of new challenges. The Red Planet, whether fictional or real, calls to human imagination. It's close enough to seem achievable, different enough to require transformation, hostile enough to test our capabilities, and similar enough to Earth to make us wonder if we could truly make it home. The Expanse explores what that transformation might mean, what price it might demand, and what we might become in the process of attempting it. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Mars, the Martian Congressional Republic, the dream of terraforming, and the culture of ships that defended that dream. May you look up at the stars with wonder. May your own dreams inspire you to great efforts, and may you remember that sometimes the journey matters more than the destination. Until next time, this is Cryo Bay Logs, signing off from the Red Planet. Sleep well and dream of what humanity might achieve among the stars.